Hello and welcome to another episode of Thinking Critically, a D&D discussion. My name is Danilo, a D&D practitioner, and I like all kinds of games and the crunchy mechanics that make them tick. This time we have Simon Eustace, the beleaguered Frederick Belmont from our sister podcast, Dungeons, Dice and Dudes, and a man with limitless accents, and that is not hyperbole. Before we begin, for those at home, this is actually Simon's and my second recording. Thanks to some technical difficulties, I managed to lose it all. So here we go again, round two. Thank you twice, Simon, for coming on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
So, as you said, I'm Simon Eustace. Been playing D&D 5e for just over 4 years. To the day, exactly the same amount of time as you.
Mm-hmm.
We started together, had the idea to play at the same time together. I think, like most people, my background in wanting to play D&D comes from video games. I've always been a big fan of RPGs growing up with like Pokemon and Final Fantasy. That later evolved into Fallout, more Final Fantasy. Fire Emblem, I guess, was like a big RPG that I played for a long time. But yeah, I think it's a running theme of your podcast that there's nothing quite like D&D. I've never really been a big tabletop game player, so it's all very new and all very fresh to me.
Very exciting. Still, even 4 years down the line, huh?
Oh yeah, every day's a school day.
Okay, all right then. Let's kick off. And when I wrote my intro script for this is the topic of today is happiness, and my intro question sounds really dumb now, but I want to stick to the format, so here we go.
Of course.
Simon, what does happiness mean to you?
Well, not to get too existential, I'll keep it on the realms of D&D and role-playing games. It might be like a very, very sentimental answer, but I think happiness should be the main thing you're trying to get from a campaign or a session. And I think that kind of overlaps a lot with enjoyment. From my perspective, I guess, is what you're after. I enjoy playing D&D solely for the social aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you couple that in with like, it's basically a perfect storm to be happy playing D&D. You have to have a character that you enjoy playing as, and I guess to some extent that you're good at playing as. A dungeon master who A, knows what they're doing, or B, is up for learning, who can be lenient and strict in the same breath. A group of players that you may or may not know. I can't really say I've played with a lot of people I don't know before. I guess when we started Rob's campaign, I still didn't really know most of those people at the table.
And you're of course talking about Rob from episode 1.
That's correct, yeah. I mean, that's basically what our friendship at work started over, was D&D about two or 3 years ago now. But going back to the point of happiness, like you kind of have to enjoy what you're doing. Otherwise, you're spending 4 or 5, maybe more, maybe a little bit less hours out of your week, if you're lucky enough, to not enjoy yourself and have a really bad time. There's nothing worse than seeing other people have a good time when you're supposed to be having a good time. I understand D&D is not for everyone, and hopefully everyone that plays has kind of found that sweet spot of what they enjoy. You're just having a fun time with your friends, and what can make you happier than that, really?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's a social activity between friends, right? Which I think is the draw for a lot of people, introverts and extroverts alike. Yeah, there are the game elements of it. It's gamified, obviously, out the wazoo for the stats and the mathematicians out there, but certainly in the groups that you and I play in, and certain elements of my other groups, that it's a reason to spend some time with friends.
Yeah, exactly. I think every session or every group that I've been involved with, I kind of get the feeling that it's the hanging out part is what draws everyone in. I don't think I could commit or play a lot of sessions where it's just like no talking, rules are rules, only talk to each other in character. I think if you listen to our podcast, you can you definitely get the sense that we're there to have a good time, and
Mm.
there's a lot of private jokes going on in the background. Whether that makes for good recording and good listening is still a little bit up for debate. But at least we know, at least we know why we're there.
We're
why
aware
we
of
shouldn't
it,
do
yeah.
those things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, one thing that you mentioned just then, which I picked up on, that I thought was really, really, really interesting, was you said one thing that can make a player more happy or have a more enjoyable time is that they were, comfortable or good with their character. And that got me thinking of, like, is the happiness of a player at the table intrinsically linked to that character they're playing? Here's my take on it.
Yeah.
My take is that it shouldn't be. It might be, but it shouldn't be. You should be character agnostic. So you might enjoy playing a certain character. But, so, for example, I've got Dungeons, Dice and Dudes character, I've also got Rob's character, and then there's one more. And what I'm getting at is I don't think my personal happiness changes based on what one of those characters I'm playing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think for me, maybe I'm not as good as disassociating myself with my characters. Like, I've obviously rolled and played as a lot of characters that don't share a lot of my personality. Can't think of a recent example, but maybe just early on when I was still kind of getting to grips with it, I played like a very awkward build that seemed like God's mistake as I played it. It was very weirdly thrown together, just stuff that I thought was cool in the moment. So I've kind of found it a little bit harder because it can be frustrating, kind of learning all of this stuff. For me, playing the game is the best way to learn it. So I was maybe trying to cram in like way too much and found myself kind of at a loss in certain situations, which just became frustrating because obviously it's a game. So when you play, you actually want to be good at it, at least for me. So yeah, there were times where I was playing as like a certain character and I wasn't particularly happy doing it because A, still didn't really know what I was doing, and B, the mechanics of the character didn't really add up. And I think part of that is when I've kind of stuck to more cookie cutter builds, and definitely nothing, I've never had like a pre-made character or anything like that, but I've just, since then I have been quite by the numbers in how I make a character, because I feel like, I think it was pointed out in your last podcast, those stereotypes and archetypes are there for a reason. And I think I might be guilty of min-maxing. But at the end of the day, for me, it's a formula that works, and it just keeps me coming back to play. It's actually the character that I rolled for the new Dungeons, Dice and Dudes chapter that we're going into has been, I want to say, my most outlandish. And I guess when we play, we'll see, because it might come across quite boring and quite vanilla. But I think that is down to external factors, like obviously the release of Tasha's Cauldron has really mixed things up. I'm going off on a tangent, but
that's the point.
I think I'm quite bad at disassociating with my characters, and this is what the character should do, but I'd enjoy the campaign a lot more if I did this. But I'm aware the story can only progress if we do this sort of thing. So maybe that's something I need to work on, is to kind of be as you said, characters not agnostic as possible.
Maybe I was being too naive or too harsh, but I think you've convinced me to a certain extent that people prefer to play things in a certain way. So if you want to play a tank, then people want to play tanky characters. So I guess in that respect, I'm wrong there, in that maybe somebody accidentally likes to play a tank, but they accidentally pick a wizard, then they're just inherently going to have less of a fun time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm being a bit elitist in a way, in that all characters are transient and you should never get attached because they're going to die, and so on and so on. And
that's why you've never had any of your characters die in any games that I've played with you, because you're just so detached that it just somehow works. Whereas I've had like at least 3 off the top of my head that I've been very close to.
Maybe the first time one of them dies, I'll just be crying in the corner for 4 hours, and that's it. I changed my tune.
It's been pent up for all these years.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not even worried about it. Who cares? Not me.
It's just a dumb character. Why'd you keep asking me?
Nah, take it or leave it, really. Well, I think what I'm beginning to think is that's maybe the reason why I've built Vic from Rob's campaign to be almost unkillable, I think has probably helped with that, I have to say.
Yeah.
Zealot Barbarian Paladin, yep, he's a beast. But that's such a huge ask, and I've mentioned it before of players, is to say, especially if the players are aware they're going to be going into a slightly longer term campaign, so we're not talking about 1 or 2, we're talking about, say, 20 or more sessions of, build this thing, but by the way, this thing you build might mean you don't have any fun.
Yeah. I think there's like a subconscious element to it as well. Is like, not to compare it to like marriage or stuff like that or relationships, but you are forming a commitment with this thing that you're kind of pledging yourself to. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do what's best for this character, and I'm gonna make sure this character has positive effects for however long we decide to go into the future.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's just a Freudian slip.
No, it is a commitment. It's exactly that. Not just with the character, but with the guys at the table and the DM.
Yeah.
Because not that I have the experience, but I imagine it's very unlikely for a DM transplant to happen successfully in the same way that like heart transplants can be a bit tricky. If the DM decides to move on and do something else, one of the players stepping up to do that is that campaign is probably pretty much dead in the water at that point. So it's
for sure.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is it's commitment there with the DM to say we're all gonna see this through to the end, come what may. But that's such a huge 6 of one and half a dozen of the other for me. So yeah, it's a commitment, and yeah, you will get more fun out of certain character archetypes than not. But on the same breadth, variety is the spice of life, and you get to write the story. So it's not like in, say, Fire Emblem or World of Warcraft when you have tank classes and that's it. Like, you're always going to be the tank. Oh, you might be able to spec them to be DPS, but you know that they're not operating at peak effectiveness because you're kind of having to shove them in a different archetype. Whereas in D&D, that rigor is a lot less strict, and that side of things is only one pillar out of 3. So you've got 2 others of role-playing and exploration and social interactions to really take the character in a way you want it. Even if you're playing a wizard but you like tanky characters, well then lean into it, make the wizard interesting, make him be a failed gladiator or something for sake of argument, and then he's gone, well, I'm just going to lock myself away out of embarrassment and read books for 40 years and then comes out the other side a wizard. And also, as I was saying, wizard tank is difficult, but it's not impossible. So you could really lean into trying to make with like blade singing or any another kind of build. You can have that flexibility to a certain extent. So, well, what I'm getting at is to anybody who's listening who might be in that awkward situation of, shit, I'm in a campaign and am I having fun? Don't know. Is it because the character is a bit not gelling with me? Well, then try and see it from a different perspective. Try and lean into some of the things you do like a bit more and lay off some of the things you don't like a bit more, and that might mean you have a happier time, would be my thoughts.
Yeah, it is very easy to kind of not to backpedal on what you were talking about last week with roles, but it's very easy to kind of get caught up in, okay, I'm the cleric and all I need to do is stand aside and let everyone else do damage and just be where I have to be. Like, D&D is just so open, and like you said, like sometimes you can have a build that's difficult to... I'd just say there's no difficult builds, it's just difficult to master. Like, what they're going to be good at, and deep down you'd know why you've made this character. So to some extent you should know what they're good at and what they're bad at. There's no inherently bad character build.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the characters that I have is a bard, College of Whispers, I think it is.
Okay, I think I've done that before. Yeah,
I enjoyed playing that one. Complete opposite to your stereotypical bard. So he was super nihilistic, super ambivalent, just hands off. I didn't really care whether that person lives or dies, so I already have a plan in my head, so I'm not going to talk to anyone. Obviously, the bard is usually one of the faces of the party, my charisma builds, but in this case, he was like, well, no, my character doesn't want to, so... And that was... Sorry, guys, someone else is going to have to talk, because, he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
I don't know another way to say it. He doesn't want to talk to this person, and no matter what you say, it ain't going to convince him.
Yeah, it is always nice to mix it up, and I think like I always say, like I've never had as much fun playing D&D as I did when I played as a bard. And I think that's because got the jack of all trades thing. You can't really put a foot wrong. They do have a stereotypical character, which you obviously, case in point, you don't have to adhere to. But because of the whole college thing, I don't really know when that came into effect, unless that's been bard law since day one.
Yeah, I think so. I think all the subclasses have always been, well, at least in 5th edition, have always been a college of something.
Yeah, and that really helps to kind of mix it up. Like mine was College of Swords, I think, and I just based it off the movie Kung Fu Hustle, like the two assassins that kill people but with their schwam kind of thing. So I just based it off of that, like, you know, not as overt a personality as a bard would be. He's just essentially pretending to be a bard.
Yeah.
Musicians can get into quite high profile places, no questions asked. Like, you turn up somewhere with a musical instrument on your back and no one's really going to ask questions, are they?
Yeah. Okay, so we might have already covered it, but what makes you personally happy when you're playing D&D?
There's very little that's comparable in terms of when you're playing D&D to like when the whole party is functioning as a unit kind of thing. Okay. So not everyone knows their role, but you may have an interaction, like say it's a conversation and sparks of their personality all come out and you kind of get to have a laugh with your mates whilst having this silly conversation. Or if you're in battle and everything is just like clicking as it goes. And I kind of, in a weird sense, maybe it's just like how I see myself when I play, or how I see my character in his role in the group was the character that I made for Dungeons, Dice and Dudes. Spoiler alert, is a strategist battle master, which kind of facilitates all these plays, which kind of, in my view, not necessarily the leader of the group, but certainly like the dad of the group. There's like a wiseness there to be like, okay, well, if I go over here, I think it'd be best if you attack from this angle and you can heal this guy. I've got all the stuff to kind of make that sort of happen. I don't know if that, I don't say it out loud. I don't know if that makes me a strategist or just very wanting to be very controlling of the situation.
the bossy dad.
Yeah, like, oh, battles are fun if they go specifically how I want them to.
You're doing it wrong.
yeah. Maybe I have just completely stepped over what I said at the start, saying there's no wrong way to play. But
no.
Let me tell you what to do, and you'll have more fun. Yeah.
Well, that's for the in-game characters to decide whether they appreciate his stratagems or not.
Yeah, those are like the main things. I think like deep down, I guess because of my background, like I've always been, you know, stories are just like the most interesting thing to me. Like whether that's TV, literature, comic books, video games. I'm quite conservative when it comes to buying video games because I have to know if it has a good story, even though I still play Fallout 4, so that could be completely out the window. And I consider Metal Gear Solid like the best story in video games.
Good. You saved me from having to murder you on the podcast. So.
But if a DM has written a good story and it's kind of the way it plays out and the way it flows, to me that's like what makes me happiest and fulfilled and everyone's engaged. You know, I like people telling stories. I'm not necessarily a good storyteller myself, which I think everyone listening to this podcast can attest to, as I've gone off in about 20 different tangents when trying to string a sentence together.
Pretty much that is the same for myself. What my notes say is juicy roleplay between characters.
Yes, it's not something I've really come into major contact with until we started doing Dungeons, Dice and Dudes. I feel like sometimes we sit there and we'll have like a 10-minute monologue or a 15-20 minute conversation just between two characters, and I know I've certainly been a part of at least two of those from memory, maybe more. And that makes me very happy because it's like I've picked up so much from the story and I've learned so much about my character that I can just talk and hopefully make it engaging and sticking with the plot and make it relevant. That I just have all this prior knowledge that gives the DM a little bit of a break. And when I was younger, I used to really like drama class and improvisation and stuff
Mhm.
like that in school. And I think a lot of people that do play D&D have either done that or have been interested in that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like outside of that sort of stuff, I am quite introverted. So to have that means of expression is like really, really fun. And like when the person opposite you is in the same frame of mind as you, that's like so fulfilling. And it's just like, yeah, we're now creating this world. It's now becoming a bit more of a reality.
We're vibing right now.
Your vibes were off at Applebee's, but let me tell you, they were killing it at the D&D table.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned it is because there's nothing else like it, which ties into nicely to what you opened with, in that in video games, what would be the equivalent of the DM is just this faceless, unliving machine, and what options you have in front of you are hella limited. So it's, can you talk to your party members? Kind of like in Mass Effect, for example. Can you talk to your party members? Yes. But will they say the same thing over and over and over again? Yes. So that immediately you smash through that fourth wall when it's, the stage falls down. Whereas in D&D, it's more rare for that stage to fall down because every interaction is unique between the players, between NPCs and the players. They're all in universe. There's no repetition. There's no, I've exhausted all the dialogue tree options. And that's what I like, because I love that feeling of either when I'm an active participant or just an audience member, is that, I can see a conversation starting here and something's about to open up. I'll grab the popcorn and strap in for the ride. That's what, either being a part of or not, just to be like, this we're witnessing creation.
Yeah.
This is something new that's being made, and everybody's just making it up, and it's new and it's part of the story, and that's cool.
Yeah, and it's, for me as well, it's like really cool to see how far and how deep someone else has gone with, like, when you find stuff out, like whether that's backstory or the reason why they did or did not do a thing at a certain point in time. Is like, it might seem random at the time, but someone else might take offense to that, and then we're the front row seat, and we find out why. It's just like the other day when we were recording for DD&D, when we kind of found out the thing about one of our characters' mums, and we all were just like, fuck, we just didn't see that coming. Like, it was a character my character had interacted with before, and is kind of, in his own secret way, like, I guess I can say it now because he's dead, has like obsessed over since the first time. And then it's like, I've been traveling with her daughter for like the last couple of weeks. Obviously, I'm not saying all twists are good, because then you end up in like a M. Night Shyamalan.
A lot of twists.
And that's when it becomes hard to keep up with. But like, a good one done well is just fantastic. And to be there when two people half improv it as well, you're just like, I'm so impressed, and I'm just so happy to be here right now.
Yeah, likewise. So let's put this puppy in reverse for a second.
Okay.
Because I wanted to talk about, you can't talk about happiness without implicitly talking about unhappiness. And rather than saving that to the end of the podcast, I thought I'd bury it in the middle.
Okay, nice.
So what makes you unhappy? And I'm not talking about specific examples. You don't need, anecdotes, or don't need to name names or anything, but just themes or motifs. So I would guess what things you go, oh, okay, that would have been better if XYZ had happened, or I think it's only fair to talk about both sides of the coin and to give everybody a holistic view.
So I think one of the main things, for me at least, is feeling like my character doesn't have anything to do. Again, that might be me like trying to smother the game and get my stink all over it. It's just like, in every situation, I want my character to know what they're going to do and have an idea of what's going to happen. Having said that, though, there have been times where I have played sessions and I've had nothing to do, and by design, and I've just had to sit back and watch. Like, I remember there was a few sessions where you were my DM, and my character was trapped in a tome.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was either half a session or two halves of two sessions. He was just trapped in there, and I was still like a novice player back then. I was like, I literally have no idea what to do I don't know if my character knows what this kind of enchantment is.
Mm.
But then that's when it's quite nice. And I had taken a back seat and I was just watching everyone else play. I was like, well, maybe I can get an idea from watching. We were playing with people that were more experienced than two of us as well. So I was like, maybe I can pick up on something.
I like how I say, talk about times you're unhappy, don't name names. And the first name you mentioned is, yes, you, download.
You made me really unhappy.
Yeah, cheers, thanks. Anyway, that's the end of the podcast, guys. So,
but I think, thinking back on it, I wasn't unhappy with the situation.
Sure.
Because it was a really good storytelling technique and it resulted in quite a good character arc. But it was just like, I don't know, maybe because sometimes I can be quite fidgety and I try to bring a lot of energy to D&D sessions. So I'm just there and I'm just like, oh, cool. I'm like so pent up, but I have like nothing to do. And it's quite frustrating that I don't know my character well enough to get out of this situation. But sometimes there are situations that you can't get out of, or you can get out of them in ways that you don't like. The main thing that makes me unhappy, though, would be, it's a very broad answer, but it's just metagaming.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that when you're playing D&D, you're with a bunch of people that are all on the same wavelength in how you play. And then you're about to get into a situation and someone's like, oh, so what's your AC? And do you know this spell? Because if you do, at least it's fine to have those conversations, but try and bring it up as a character.
Yeah.
But would your character ask that? Would
Yes.
they know what spells are, like what spells exist?
Yeah, my stance on that is it's easier in an odd way to start with a group of player characters that don't know each other, because then they have to learn all that up on the fly. And as soon as someone casts lightning bolt, then the rest of the party can go, oh, you can shoot lightning from your fingertips. That's a big deal. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Rather than if they've been traveling together, it's just the characters know he can shoot lightning, but the players don't. And then you have a huge disconnect there, which is tricky to overcome from a strategy point of view. And then in combat, when it's like, you go over here, how are you looking? How many spell slots have you got left? Firstly, you've got limited time. You've got 6 seconds to fight, and then also maybe scream a command at somebody. So you're not about to be like, oh, well, let me just check. I've got a couple of slots at this level and a couple of slots at that level. Yeah. And, I didn't pack that spell today. Sorry, sir. So that's you're super limited by the rules.
The words spell slot should not be in any D&D character's vocabulary.
But yeah, I had another train of thought, but it disappeared into I must have expended that spell slot of thought. But yeah, just they would never ask those questions. Sometimes they get asked of, how are you looking? Well, there's 2 gnolls tearing me to pieces right now. So
yeah,
you put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, when people play with their game brain rather than their character brain, they're the ones doing themselves a disservice.
Obviously, you can play it as a more strategic game, like your Advanced Wars and like your Fire Emblem, but I just feel that that's doing the game a disservice almost. You're not, funnily enough, as if you're playing a tank in World of Warcraft as a DPS, you're not really playing it at its peak efficiency. If you want to play a strategy game, there are 10 million strategy games that do it a million times better than D&D. So why would you deliberately hamstring yourself to play it in D&D when you've got 2 huge pillars of nothing you can get anywhere else in video games? just kind of like kicking the dust over there, waiting for you to be like, yeah, but he's limping, but it's because he got caught in a bear trap when he was 6 years old, but you don't know that because you never asked him. And he's not limping because he's getting hurt in the fight. Like that's there you go. That's just improvisation for you there.
That's the key word for today.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna redo the podcast. It's called improvisation. However, that is a really good title for one. If I don't already have it,
feel free to steal that.
Thank you.
One final thing, just in case you're about to move on, that does make me unhappy when playing D&D is lack of snacks.
It's a critical component.
Yeah.
A spell component.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a given. In every session I played, you at least bring something for yourself or for the table. So to not see any turn up is absolutely heartbreaking, and you're going to have a bad session.
God, I'm glad I didn't leave this to the end, because that is sad. One thing that I wanted to mention on that note, and then we'll start talking about fun stuff again, is And here's the good segue from metagaming into what I'm about to talk about, and it's going to be quite an interesting point of discussion, because mine was that when the average level of rule knowledge is below what I would consider necessary to run an effective game, which kind of contradicts the metagaming thing, because obviously if you don't know the rules, you basically almost can't metagame to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So you can kind of solve that problem, but you've introduced another problem to solve it. So I guess the solution to both of those is, just like in life, harder work of A, to learning the rules, and B, knowing how to not metagame. But then once everybody gets to that stage, then in my opinion, everybody should be having more fun. You've kind of stepped back and you've said, I know what I can do, and I don't need to worry about what they can do because my character wouldn't. Now I can just play the game, almost. There's no barriers to entry anymore. There's no walls being put up of, oh, I really need to know how much HP he's got, because that will change who I attack. But that's a barrier there. You've artificially introduced a barrier to your own happiness by trying to think about it in that way. And the moment you can start to knock down those and let go, then it can bring everybody's happiness up. There was a tweet of someone yesterday, quite a popular one, that said, never be anxious about not knowing the rules. And I'm going to take this opportunity on my own damn podcast to disagree with that. In that, we talked about it before, in that I think players have a responsibility. So the DM has a bunch, but also the players have a responsibility, and you can never abstain from that responsibility. So sure, first couple of sessions, or if you haven't played for a decade, you're going to be like, wow, I don't know what's going on. Fine.
Yeah.
But as we've all said, everybody's there to have a fun time and to come out the other side happy. Everybody is playing together. In both of those sentences, there's no differences there between DM and players. Everybody's there to play together to have fun. There's no different objectives, there's no different targets, which is what Howie was saying in the last one, and that the roles of the DM and the players are actually pretty much exactly the same. And you always see memes about group projects at school highlight how there's always the one that doesn't do any work and rightly paints them as the pain in the arse. And D&D is the same. It's a cooperative effort for everybody together. And in my opinion, as soon as you unbalance that knowledge seesaw too much, then things are going to fall off, because you're shifting your responsibility onto other players who already have their own responsibility. And it can work for a little amount of time, but
I think it's one of those things where it's just like, by all means, do not worry about knowing the rules. And by extension, don't worry at all about knowing all the rules. If you watch things like Critical Role, even Matt Mercer doesn't know everything. And he's kind of like the deity, the higher deity of like the D&D community. I also listen to podcasts called Dungeons and Daddies, and majority of the people playing, this is their first game. But, and this is where I think it is most important, they know the rules that surround their character. And I think we spoke about this on the last recording that's been lost in the ether. You're not going to pick up on all your rules instantly, because it's quite subjective and situational. But as long as you have like a decently firm grasp of what your character can do, then you shouldn't really be afraid to ask the DM or take someone at the table for a quick aside and just be like, why should I be scared of a treasure chest that has teeth and is laughing? That's experience. It's like, oh, that's not a treasure chest, that's a mimic. And that's a pretty bad example, but there's things as a new player that you're just not privy to. But down the line, you're doing more and more research, or you'd like to think that you're doing more and more research. Because D&D is one of those games where what you do outside of a session is almost as equally as important as what you do in a session. I've always been quite guilty of not putting the work in outside of D&D sessions, but at this point, it's not too particularly bad, even though now I've just rolled a character that has a ton of new rules and features. I like to think I kind of know that stuff now. I've learned my lesson before. But again, it's like knowing what situations your character thrives in and where they might need work, and where you can include like funny perks and stuff like that of their character. For me, that's the main way to learn. But you shouldn't really be going into D&D, I'd say, individually. because I've been there for like when groups of people wanted to learn to play. So when everyone's like, "Oh, what does this do? What does this do?" You actually kind of have everyone's attention when you do that. But if you're a new player, you should at least make some effort to kind of understand some of the rules. And I do get like a lot of people are too afraid to ask someone more experienced than them for help, especially on something like D&D, because it's a question that you expect to get a 10-minute answer, and then you're in like a 3-hour conversation.
Yeah.
I definitely think everyone has a responsibility when it comes to that sort of thing.
Cool, thank you. Let's move back on then to sunnier climes. Have you DM'd before? I can't remember.
I've never done it. No, I've been writing one for 2 years, a one shot.
A one shot for 2 years.
Well, I say writing it for 2 years, as in thinking about it for 2 years. It was one you were a part of. It's a sequel to one when Nathan first TM'd us. I want to say last year, but it could be longer than that. It was where my character turned on the party.
Oh yes, I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of did that in mind where that's going to come up, and then that'll be my introduction to DMing.
Okay. Have you enjoyed the preparation you've done in that time?
Of the 2% I've completed, yeah, it's nice. Like you said, when you're seeing two people RP, you're witnessing creation. On like step down from that, I guess I'd say I'm not very good at coming up with my own ideas, but I can base stuff and work off of other people's ideas. So Nathan's already put in the hard work and has created this world and these characters and everything like that. And then I can be like, oh, well, let me take that and then I can put this spin on it. Not to kind of fellate myself, I guess would be the best term. But if you think of someone as Ridley Scott doing Alien, and then you have James Cameron completely turn it on its head, but be faithful and make Aliens, that's the kind of approach I'd like to take to doing a one-shot. Although I think Alien is a superior film.
You keep that to your own film podcast, yeah?
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, from a DM, what I get a lot of enjoyment out of, if I hadn't muted myself at the time, I'd be squealing, is when the players have that juicy RP. I don't know if there's a theme happening. I like doing it and I like watching it. Both as wow. Don't take that soundbite out of context. Anybody? Wow, cool. I like watching people role play in D&D and picking my words very carefully now, and also like interacting in those settings. But also because that's where I feel to have a really successful game, you need to do that to a certain level. There needs to be those interactions, those how do you guys talk to each other, how do you guys think about each other. And one thing, going off of what I've spoken earlier about, is everything, and this is a critical component, everything that happens in game is roleplay. Everything. Which isn't like, I keep using World of Warcraft as an example because it's the one I'm most familiar with, but in World of Warcraft, if you learn tailoring as a profession, you're learning that, unless you're on a roleplay server, which I believe are the minority, you're learning that for a mechanical benefit. You're learning tailoring to make bandages and to make cloth items and to make bags and stuff that you can sell to make money. And in, say, Fire Emblem, you know, when you are putting the archers on the back line and stuff like that, it's all typically mechanical benefits because that's, you want to win and you need to win to move forward. Whereas in D&D, even if you lose, you're still moving forward. There's still things happen, time moves on, and everything you do in D&D is role playing. So you're using a greatsword. Why? How can you even pick that up? Where did you get it from? Is it anything special to you? How do you kill this guy? Oh, you prison shank him. Okay, why do you why are you doing it like that? That isn't just asking the players for fun. Or, you know, excuse me, I'm not asking the players for work. I'm not asking them to do homework and tell me, name 101 ways you can kill a goblin. Like, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm asking, what does your character do in this situation? Because everything they do colours that character. And that's what makes me happy, is seeing people lean into those colorings, those colorations, and being like, okay, yeah, I am a big sword. I do wield the great sword, but why? And not just because it's 2d6 or 1d12. I can't remember which way around it is, but you know what I mean? Like, why does he do that? So that's what makes me happy from a DM perspective, alongside, as all great artists do, working on work that may never see the light of day and being your own worst enemy.
It's never completed, is the thing. Yeah.
That concept of even if you lose, you're still moving forward, I think it's quite a nice way, if I do say so myself, to toot my own horn, to use the safe for work version, Simon, of is a good, you know, even if the whole character, even if you have a TPK, there are 101 different ways to keep playing in the same universe, but you honour those characters in some way. So like statues get built in their honour, or you meet their family, who are obviously shocked that their father's been out adventuring and has unfortunately passed away, and you're still tying it together. And yeah, you might be playing with a bunch of new characters, but that story's moved forward. The enemy's won that battle. What does that mean for the nation at large? Well, a whole bunch of stuff. If it was a critical battle, that's huge. And maybe the new bunch of characters you bring in, 2 weeks later, are, that city's now been overrun and you can't go there because your character's failed and there's no statues to them. Actually, everybody hates them because they failed. And
yeah, I kind of like the idea that in a campaign you're playing not as the main characters. You're a group of adventurers, but you keep turning up, or you're not the most famous group of adventurers. You're just third or fourth rate, and you hear of this corruption in a city, and by the time you get there, you're like, oh yeah, the group already sorted that out. And then you're just like, shit, how are we going to make a name for ourselves? Or how are we going to make money when there's this other group that are just us but better?
Yeah.
It kind of points into the fact that in D&D, you may play as characters, but they're not necessarily the main characters. I think like 90% of games they are, but it is a very interesting idea to explore.
The pretty much the only other D&D podcast I listen to is called Not Another D&D Podcast, and their whole first campaign was called The Campaign After the Campaign, and the whole premise was that there's already been 3 heroes of legend, 3 level 20 people that basically ascended to almost godlike status and saved the world from a cataclysmic event, and that the players in that campaign are now picking up loose ends that they might have left off because the previous people were still human in the context of D&D, and so still made mistakes and still had loose ends and still left. Some people hated them because of the actions they took, left them in ruin. So that stuff can happen, and maybe that's your player characters.
To draw it back to like a reference, I think this might be off topic, but something like Mandalorian, I can't remember if you said you watch it or not.
Seen season 1.
Where it's just like, the Empire got destroyed, but it's not like overnight all their resources got taken away and everyone burnt the stormtrooper armor, and he's the one picking up the odd jobs. And round about this time, there are like other characters and First Order is coming into fruition, but you don't necessarily see that. So sometimes it is quite nice to play as characters that are kind of, maybe it's why I've always been attracted to like side characters or support. That's it. You don't have the main focus. Like everything's kind of going on around you, and you're just kind of like the everyman who this actually affects in the real world. I guess it kind of brings real world experiences into D&D. It's just like you play as D&D, you play as these adventurers, you destroy a city, but it was for the good of the city because of corruption, everything like that. And it's like, no, these are affecting people as well. Your role should... again, it comes down to role play. Your role play should, affect other people as well, and you should be aware of that.
Talking about sideline characters, just reminded me of Fire Emblem again. Isn't there usually like a farmhand, or at least I think in Awakening you could get?
So in Awakening, there's I keep wanting to say Rickon, but it's not. It's the guy who has the saucepan on his head, and he's just like, I can't even remember his reason for. You wouldn't believe that I played like 150 hours of it, but I've completely forgotten why it's the stupidest reason why he joins the adventurers, and he's just like he's absolutely terrible, but he's one of those characters that you can just build his stats and he becomes one of the best because they're all experienced travelers, and he is just a guy on a farm. So obviously he's not going to be as good as everyone else.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a good exercise in making you explore bonds between characters. That's just me gushing over Fire Emblem as usual.
I opened that door for you. Yeah.
Please shut up.
I do like that idea though of playing someone who's almost been wrapped up in a whirlwind and just happens to be alongside wizards and sorcerers and, you know, assassin rangers and all this other crap, and they're just there like, we're fighting like eldritch monstrosities right now, guys. Is no one else like losing their fucking mind?
Yeah.
No, I've killed 7 different eldritch monstrosities this week. Oh, okay.
I'll take your word for it.
So that would be interesting character to play, I think.
Now you're making me want to re-roll again.
That's a good. That is a good segue actually, because the next topic I was going to bring up is player character happiness. So we've discussed in the podcast in a number of previous episodes about how characters should have goals. Or to put it another way, yes, you can play a nihilistic, kind of ambivalent, I'm just here because I want to do something. But then that in and of itself is a goal. They want to do something, otherwise they would have just rotted away in some back room somewhere. So my point being is that the goals of player characters can be so wonderfully varied, and presumably the attainment of those goals makes player characters happy. So I guess my question to you is, let's just spitball here of what makes some good character goals for a player character. You know, maybe some people are listening and are struggling to make a character as we speak, or maybe they've found themselves with characters that don't necessarily have very clear goals, and therefore they're struggling to find that link, you know, what makes them happy. So
I used to be really, really guilty of when I'd make a character is go absolutely all out on the backstory, who they are, where they've been, where they come from, and I would say where they're going, but I've always used to write it up to, and then they met this adventuring party. And then I'd never think beyond that. And I've always had a bad habit of just making these free-flowing characters, either whether that's easier to do or I just haven't known what their goals are.
Yeah.
But I think the way I've dealt with it recently is them joining a party is a distraction. Because I think a lot of people write... It's very rare, like D&D players will roll a party that do already know each other.
Yeah.
And think about it now, why wouldn't you? It makes it so much easier. I'm kind of doing half that in like another campaign that I'm playing. Like one of my characters knows one of the other characters, and then another one has been brought in as a stranger, which makes for quite an interesting dynamic. Yeah, character goals are... It has always been something I have struggled with.
I think it's tricky, to be fair to you. I think it's tricky because certainly as players, when you've been DMing for a length of time, it gets easier because you can, you know what the DM wants, and you can kind of think about stuff that wouldn't throw off their plans too much. But as players come out the gate, it's very difficult to be like, maybe I just want to make a huge amount of money. Okay, that's great. That's at least you've got something, and you feel that that's enough. But then when you get in game and say suddenly you make 2,000 gold, is that where's the line? Is that enough, or do I actually want 20k? Oh god, I had no frame of reference. And then maybe you do get 20k, and then they go, okay, well, bye then, and then just leave.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like where improv and development can come into. Like something like that. It's just like I kind of feel like I had that for Honey alongside Vinegar in Rob's campaign. Was he just wanted to make as much money as possible, and then over time that led to him becoming really greedy. And then it was like, okay, the opportunities are drying up, but I still want to make more money, which made him quite vicious. And going back into his backstory, he was a few hundred years old, so for a while he used to work for one of the bosses that we fought against, or I think that was where we last left it, a character that we'd come into contact with. It had never come up because the organisation was so big. He'd obviously never met his boss. He knew who he was, but boss man did not know he was under his employ. And I think from there, it was just like, I spoke to Rob, who's DMing that one. I was like, okay, it makes sense that this character's starting to change and the bitterness is starting to come through, because greed has always driven him, whether he's been helping people on the right side of the law or the wrong, it's always been about money and greed for him. So he's a bit more kept to himself and he's a bit quieter. Maybe the group kind of notices that, and there was a turning point where he kind of lost everything, including his oldest friend or his most trusted colleague, and was just like, okay. And then he kind of fell into his old habits. It's like, this isn't something I'm going to easily recover from, but I know a quick fix to get out of this, and that's to reassociate myself with people that will always give me work, even though it's the wrong kind of work. But I'm so scared of losing everything again. I just need to know that I'm supported, even though they already are. Like, he was, I wouldn't say incredibly wealthy character, but had businesses and stuff like that. But the thought of losing it was scarier than anything else. And I think when you know your character quite in and out, it actually makes it quite a fun way to kind of develop their characteristics. I don't know if it came through well, but I always tried to kind of act it. I wanted everyone playing at the table to see that I was playing this character differently, and I tried to get myself into a different frame of mind, because it's like, yeah, his personality is changing for the worse, and I want everyone to be aware of that with the way he talks and the way he acts.
Yeah, you got to exaggerate sometimes, because
for sure.
Yeah, one thing you learn as a DM is that players are obviously thinking about 200 things at once, so it's very easy for tricks and hints and tips to fall through the cracks, let alone
that's true. Yeah,
just being a bit more of a bastard for a day can very easily just be written off as Simon's having a Simon day and nothing to do in game. So yeah, you do need to sometimes exaggerate the actions. But you've basically described in one character maybe about 3 different legitimate goals for a player character to make them happy. So, well, maybe not make them happy, but avoid unhappiness is probably the better way to put it. So greed, just a one-word goal, is pretty good. Just to say, I'm willing to do a whole bunch of stuff to get money or to get items. If it aligns with this group of crazies that are walking around and dungeon delving and stuff, well then fine, I'll tag along just to make some money. And then that's a really good goal because it opens up. You've got so much character development there. Maybe they eschew that and become a family man and go, nope, there's more to life than just material accumulation. Or they double down and become a big bad evil guy because they go, hang on, I'm traveling with 4 people here that have got loads of stuff and I want it. So let me work that way.
It is quite hard for me as well, because sometimes I feel like my character's goals do change.
That's great. That's just development.
Yeah, for sure. Like Frederick is a perfect example of that. His goal essentially was to be the new king of the Harpers, because I felt like he was kind of egotistical enough to feel like he could make that difference, and he was slowly turning his back on his faith. And then when he needed it the most, it wasn't there for him, because I guess he always sort of relied on it, and it kind of changed the arc of his character. And I felt like it changed his characteristics a little bit in the fact that he was no longer this self-righteous, ego-driven, I deal with information and I can find out anything I want because that's what the Harpers do. Which, in a sense, like, if you know Harper lore, that's frowned upon. Like, you're doing it for the good, you're not doing it for leverage. And then his whole goal was, I don't want to be the leader of this organization anymore, I just want to be accepted by my faith again. But he's dead now, so
spoilers for the Dungeons and Dice and Dudes podcast there.
Oh yeah, you might want to edit that out.
Don't worry, that ship has long sailed, so I'll just smash the spoiler tags in the description. And then also we were talking about the end of the world stuff. So most or a lot of campaigns will have something that threatens at least a local area, a local space. And whether you're good, neutral, or evil, that is bad. Because even if you're evil and you like killing people, well, if this other guy kills everybody, well, there'll be no one left for you to kill. So, okay, well then I'm not, that character's not going to be happy anymore. So there are a lot of ways to tie that kind of antagonistic and protagonistic goals to a singular entity. And if it's some cataclysmic event, that pretty much covers all bases. And Yeah, it's that avoiding unhappiness. So hey, if my city gets destroyed because some dude wants to summon a Tarask, well then, hey, that's where my linen shop is, and I built that linen shop with my own hands. I don't want that to happen. So it'll be happy. I'll be a lot happier if I didn't have to worry about a Tarask.
Yeah.
It's probably the driving. You could just have that one sentence, and that could drive a whole character off of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already spitballing stuff in my head. Like, he can be that character that's like, I've never done anything like this before. I just don't want to lose my source of income and my business.
Yeah.
But please help me. I know this is a bad thing to do, but I have like minor selfish reasons behind doing what I need to do.
Yeah, exactly. So this is another good segue into the happiness of non-player characters, so NPCs. And there's going to be some overlap here with previous episodes. But so what do you think makes NPCs happy?
What makes NPCs happy? So I think I've kind of been spoiled with a few games where NPCs kind of provide a role in, let's just say, like off the top of my head, like providing side quests, or thinking of Pokemon as an example. They just give you stuff a lot of the time, especially in the more modern games. Like they'll give you Pokemon, or here's 10 Pokeballs. Whereas examples I can think of, it might not strictly be limited to that, and it might not be the best example, but it's what's on my mind is Final Fantasy. Like, some will give you a hint into a microcosm of backstory of the area that you're in. But, a real world perspective is you're making your character just walk up to someone, a stranger, and engage in conversation. They're going to say literally anything to end that as quick as possible. And I think it was in your last podcast you were talking about saying like, hey, this person's got a 9 to 5. You're asking them a bunch of questions. You're inconveniencing them. They're not just static items for you to interact with to get information. And I think that can be like when role-playing and the DM's universe can really kind of start to take up a life of its own, when you're kind of like, no, they're not here to be part of a game. They're not part of a game. These are just people that are going about their everyday lives, and some will want to come with you on this adventure, and you may invite them on the adventure. Some may want to come and they have no credentials to be anywhere near swinging a great axe or a warhammer. Others want to be left alone. This person might be on their way to a wedding, so there's no chance they're going to talk to you. I think it's quite a common factor in a lot of modern games where, why should NPCs exist? Because I think everyone's played like a million games where they haven't existed, kind of showing your age, like going back in time where there wasn't enough pixel count or a budget to allow for NPCs. So they have to serve a purpose. And if that purpose is to bring an area to life by, for lack of a better phrase, blowing you off, then yeah, that's what they're there for. They're there to make it seem more realistic.
I think a good point there, you talked about Pokemon, and you could ask anybody if they remember the name of the NPC that gives them 10 Pokeballs. Or can you remember the name of the NPC that gives you that potion? And the answer will be no. I don't care. They may as well just put a potion on the ground and you just picked it up.
Yeah.
Because they just...
Oh, I remember one. Prof Oak's Aid. He was like, if you catch this Pokemon, he's the first person to ever give you something. So he's a good example of talk to random people and you might get something, which is like a staple in RPGs. And I've always kind of thought of it as a weird kind of meta commentary where take the time out of your day to get to know someone you don't know, because there might be something in it for you, whether that's material or existential or something like that. But I think that's just me looking way too deep into it.
We're dropping the life lessons on this episode. Boom.
Yeah, like everything you need to learn in life, you'll learn from RPGs. I've now completely forgotten the one that's the parody with Ness.
Earthbound.
Earthbound, yeah. That's if you want to get ahead in life, just play Earthbound and you'll be alright.
Wow, that's we need to start charging for these podcasts. So like life lessons to get ahead in business.
Yeah, like business people read like The Secret or something. I think for gamers and everyone, it's just play Earthbound and you'll get ahead.
Okay, so my thoughts on that were, as I discussed with Howie, is that obviously they're going about day-to-day life, and as we talked about with you, and yada yada yada. So I guess what would make an NPC happy, or the happiness of NPCs, is as it is with everybody, and this sounded a lot more revelatory in my head, is not dying. So
yeah,
which obviously you go to speak to anyone on the street and you say, would dying make you unhappy? They'd probably go, yeah, it would, which obviously goes without saying, but it's weird that thought.
There's bound to be someone that's like ask enough people and they'll be like a Bane fanatic and they're like, could you please sacrifice me?
So yeah, it sounds stupid, but the critical point to take away from there is that the fact that I even had that thought proves that even to, I say even to me, like I'm sitting up here in my ivory tower, but having made 1 million NPCs, it's even to me, it's still very important to think, what do they want and what do they need? And it's something that I never, it's hugely important of this person, doesn't want to die. Okay, rule number 1, fine, got that in the ground. So that's going to be a huge driving factor for the interactions. But maybe just above that, they also want their kid to go to school, for example. And maybe just above that, they want to win a pie eating contest that's coming up at the weekend. There's all these myriad of different things that might make NPCs happy. To DMs out there, use those half-baked character ideas and use those 4 a.m. fever dream in the middle of the night, waking up in sweat of, I want to make a character that is the front end of a fish and the back end of a donkey, and it flies around on a magic carpet. Don't use those crazy.
And he wants to open the pie shop
to go with his linen shop from earlier on to start building that network. Use those to make interesting NPCs. There's opportunities there to be like the real estate, the realtors from Honey and Vic. Like there'll be real estate agents that want to land and want property, and maybe there are some that don't care how those homes become available again, and perhaps a mission for a kind of neutral evil party would be go and murder the people that live in these houses, because I'm going to pay you a shitload to do it, because I'm going to make a shitload when I flip them. So so there's a lot of wiggle room there, I think, for NPCs. For sure. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of happiness?
More just advice, just if you're playing D&D and you find yourself coming away from sessions not particularly happy with how it's going, talk to the DM or talk to the members, the people that you're playing with. Maybe talk to the DM first, because that's probably the person that you're going to know best, maybe, and just see where... I was going to say see where you're going wrong, not necessarily say you're doing anything wrong, but just why you can't connect with the game, why you can't connect with the other characters, why you can't connect with your character. Because at the end of the day, it's you're hanging out with your mates. You should be doing it for the right reasons. Like, I know that people get a lot of existential joy from playing D&D, working through their own issues, and you'd like to think people are doing that with happiness on the other end of that being the goal. I'm kind of talking in a lot less metaphorical sense. You're just there to hang out and have a good time, depending on what your idea of a good time is. Like, I'm not much of a club kid, so I think I'd rather play D&D, and that's where I get my jollies. So I think just make sure you're having fun. Yeah. Like, it's really, really simple advice, but
it seems simple, but it really isn't. And your point of talking to the DM first, but not only because, yes, you might know them best, but not necessarily, but only because they have the bigger picture. So if your problem is maybe with another player, I don't like how that player treats my character, the DM might be in a position to say, there's a reason why
Yeah,
your character just
exactly.
doesn't know.
Yeah.
So this is not an out-of-game problem. This is actually an in-game problem. So
Yeah.
if I was to put myself in those shoes, I would say, well, give it a shot, try and lean into that a bit more, bring it up in-game rather than outside of game. And if you as a player are still not having fun, then, okay, we've tried, it didn't work, fine. We'll have to think of another way to make you start to have fun.
Yeah.
But it's always that just talk to everybody. Yeah, you're there to have fun. And if that is literally the binary choice of, are you having fun, yes or no? There's no weird hidden things. There's no second questions or second guessing. It's literally like, are you having fun, yes or no? Are you happy, yes or no? Okay, no, well then let's sort it out. Done.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't change, or we can't do this, or we can't do that. Or it's the how you fix it should be priority number one. And the first step on that is talking to somebody.
Wow, these are the life lessons.
Boom. Not even. I'm just going to take out all references to D&D and then republish it as just a
self-help podcast.
Boom. Next episode is relationships. So, and if that isn't on my list of topics, it is going to be now. So,
so I've given you 2 for free.
Yeah. There we go. That's good value for money there. All right then. Well, in which case, we are just about at the end of today's topic and today's time. So, thank you very, very much, Simon, not only for recording once with me, but for being willing to come back on again to record a second time.
Anytime.
Is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, of course. We've got, I was going to say our own. Me and you are part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of a bigger story, a bigger campaign. We've got a podcast called Dungeons, Dice and Dudes, which follows a campaign set in the world of Romaris. At point of recording, we're about to go into the second chapter, but point of release, we're probably 2 or 3 episodes away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry if I've spoiled any of that leading up to it.
Well, hey, chapter 2 is a good place to jump back in, right? So
yeah, of course, yeah. I'll have a new character, so it'll be a nice refresh. Also, you can't see it, but I've grown my moustache out for November, helping to bring awareness to... I think the charity's changed. It used to just solely be for awareness of prostate cancer, but now it crosses a whole broad spectrum of issues that affect men. Not exclusively, but it's a conversation that needs to be had, so it's quite nice to help shine a spotlight onto that. Danlo has linked myself in the Instagram post, so you can follow that and follow my bio. I'm fully aware by the time this comes out, November might have been and gone, but just in case.
I think we'll come in just on the 27th. So
okay.
And either way, you can still donate afterwards, I think, can't you?
Of course.
I'll drop a link in the episode description, and I would recommend people do, because every year Simon does it, and no matter how much of a person that should appear in a number of registers he looks like, he still endeavours to do it. So please do take a look at that. Is there anything else?
No, that's it. Those are the 2 main things.
All right. If anyone has any thoughts or comments on the weird, wacky roller coaster topics we've discussed today, you can tweet me at @danlow_D&D. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night.
Thank you.